Hi, and welcome to the podcast, Help Me Rhonda. I'm your host, Dr. Rhonda Karg, and each week I'll be sharing information with you about mental health related topics. And as you know, some weeks and for some episodes, I have special guests. And today I have a very special guest, Jen Aly, and she is both a business and a prosperity coach. And she's going to be having a discussion with us today, share information with you guys about improving our relationship with money, which is such an important topic. And I can't wait to hear more about that today, and also share a little bit of my journey with money as well. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So tell us about your journey with money, maybe even starting as far back as like your childhood, what you were like with money, because I can definitely see how my relationship with money changed over time.
I love that you asked that because I've never actually gone there all the way in an interview, so that's good. So for me, when I was a kid, I remember like going to the bank, having a savings account, and like, putting little tiny bits of money in there. And I remember being at the table with my brother, who's 3 years younger than me, and having him, like, he was like kind of a hoarder. Like, he would just keep his money and I would want my money to spend it. Like, I was like buying jewelry in like the 80s and 90s, all those different rings and stuff. And so and so the thing for me that was one of the biggest impacts about money was my relationship with math, actually, because my first low grade was a C. And I talk about this in my TED Talk. My first low grade was a C in third grade, and it was very like, it was like this bursting a bubble of like, I'm not perfect, and like, I'm afraid I won't get approval and love. Like, it was just like this like, and then I hated math. And then I hated math throughout school. And in high school, I ended up getting a tutor at some point because I kind of got lost, and that helped save my butt, really, because my grandmother was a teacher and she got me a tutor, which was like, oh my God, so many times she helped me out like that. But then like in 2003, when I first started my business, my first business, I was just not looking at finances. Like, I would have somebody else do my bookkeeping in like February or March for the previous year. So like, I wasn't looking at stuff. I was just like flying by the seat of my pants with the cash flow, and it wasn't a great relationship. And I didn't really have a clue about marketing and sales and all that. I was just kind of winging it and focusing on the coaching that I was doing. I was also a professional organizer at the time. And ended up like broke as crap in 2008 when I was in California, and I had tons of debt. Like, I think I had $40,000 of debt. And it ended up being $60,000 in like a couple more years. And that's what happens. And people don't realize that's what happens, because interest is like, it's like, if you have $8,000 debt, you're paying $1,500 interest this year. And, you're going to double the cost of what you paid, or at least increase it by 50%, pretty quickly. So I had this debt. I didn't have consistent income. I had denial about like what it would take to have a business. I was burying my head in the sand about finances, and I was angry at God and myself and the world at the time. And so I stopped entrepreneurship for a little while, went back to teaching, moved to Hawaii. So I moved to Hawaii, started teaching again, taught English for a few years. And then I burned out on teaching, and then I taught English, obviously not math. And then I moved to Asheville, and I had started making jewelry as like a sort of a compensation for grading papers, like as a reward for myself for grading tons of papers.
Wow, creative.
And so I started a business here in Asheville, and I knew I wanted it to be different. And I had actually studied some business skills with some groovy mentors in California before that, so I had more of a clue this time. It's kind of too late before. And I got support in marketing. I got support in all kinds of ways. And I did things very differently with no debt. And and I created a jewelry design business that thrived for 9 years. And I sold the assets of that at the end of 2020. And then in the middle of that, I was really aware of like hearing artists and creatives talk about like this scarcity mindset and like the starving artist idea. And it was like frustrating for me because I was just hearing the limiting beliefs, I just knew that it didn't have to be that perception. It wasn't serving them, So I was inspired to start coaching again, and I started business coaching again this time, and been doing that for about 7 years. And I did a TED Talk in 2019 where I shared my story of, not having money for food and trying to cook the last food that I have and it not being edible, and pawning all the jewelry I had for my family and just like most of it, and using that for rent, and, just like really being in like, survival mode, and on and off for years. I dealt with that. Even after I started my jewelry business too, it was just bootstrapping. So and it's paid off, so it's like, so money's been such a huge teacher for me. And to really help people honor that relationship with it, and to have good habits with money so that they can have a relationship with it that's conscious, so that they're not so that they're not acting out about it, or they're not, ignoring it or avoiding it, because all those things lead to sabotage.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you and I talked the first time in preparation for this podcast, and I think I told you a little bit about my history and my relationship with money, which I'm honestly still working on very much.
Absolutely. Me too.
I spent 11 years below the poverty level when I was in school with my son, and I was a single mom, and we really struggled, and literally I didn't know how some of my meals were going to come from, like eating ketchup on saltines, so that he could have mac and cheese, like not a good scenario.
Wow.
And then after 11 years of really struggling, all of a sudden I started making money because I was done with school, and I ended up landing this really great job, and all of a sudden I had this money, and I had never really been taught how to really budget or what to do like that. It all seemed very foreign to me and very scary for me. It would trigger me. I didn't want to think about it. To this day, money still makes me feel a little uncomfortable. And, I'm working on that. But what happened was after I started making good money, I wasn't paying attention to how much money I was spending, and started working with a therapist that I had at the time. And she said to me, "We really need to work on your relationship with money." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I had no idea. And she said, "You have a very young relationship with money, meaning that you just want to be oblivious, like mysteriously money comes in, mysteriously money goes out, having no idea what's coming in, having no idea what's going out." And so she had me start writing down exactly how much I was spending, and I was honestly very resistant to that. Like, it just felt like, in addition to, oh, that just sounds like a lot of work, but it was more just like I didn't want to look at it. I like just being in complete denial and just not even knowing it's coming, it's going. And I was like you. I ended up getting into debt. I remember just being really mindless about my spending one year, and I ended up racking up. To this day, I don't even know what I did, but in the matter of like, I want to say 6 months or something crazy, I ended up charging like around $15,000 worth of stuff. And all of a sudden, and this was like, this was the culmination of a while of just being really like years of being mindless about my spending. And my therapist at the time just saying, like, we really need to work on this, and you need to figure out like how much you're spending, and we need to come up with a budget, and we need to, and I was just like, oh, you know. So you know, I'm grateful there's people out there in the world like you that can help people like me develop a better relationship with money, but it is very scary. It's like such a trigger for so many people. So how do you help people get past that? What do you do with people?
Yeah, so all of my clients at this point are entrepreneurs. So they're either in the beginning of the business, or they're usually they're at the beginning of phases of the business the first few years, or they're at a place where they've hit a plateau and they want a new structure for their business to go to the next level without burning out. So one of those two situations. And a lot of it is habits, partly because it's really tracking your numbers, understanding your numbers, facing like all the profit loss of your business, keeping your business and personal separate. Really, but the bottom line is that it's about you trusting your vision for your life and your business, and letting that lead you and letting that inspire you to have a clear relationship with money, so that you can evolve the relationship. Because if you don't evolve the relationship, you're not going to make more. Or if you make more, you're going to spend more, and you're not going to have spaciousness, you know? Or you can hoard it. Same, you know, similar thing, you know, it's like, so it's a really interesting dance to create a healthy relationship with money. And I think the bigger picture is like, what do you want to create in your life? And letting that guide you and lead you, and then using money as a tool to help you get there. So even using money as a visioning tool. So like, you know, some people, if they feel like they're in a survival mode, they have a short-term relationship with money, basically. Because it's like, you know, it's like right now, like there's urgency. There's not a long-term connection or relationship around like what's going to happen in 6 months, a year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And that's like, you think of a relationship and you think about like the long-term commitment and that visioning. It is like this interesting, you know, analogy for like how long do you see your relationship with money out? You know, how far out can you see it? And then how can you create more of that connection and those habits to meet monthly or weekly with money, and to track what you're spending, what you're bringing in. And, you know, there's tons of tools for all that. And it is just a matter of finding ones that work for you. And really it's about systems for that, which, I mean, I know I resist systems in some ways, and I know a lot of my clients do, because those are her really creative resist systems, but systems are the way to make progress. So.
That's true. That is very true. Are there apps, books? What do you usually recommend to people that you work with?
Yeah, so I do an assessment of like what has worked for them in the past and what hasn't worked, because it's really, there's no right or wrong answer to how to do it. It's really about finding a way that works for you. Like it can literally be pencil and paper. You know, like it can be that simple. It can be a simple spreadsheet of tracking what you want to spend. In my money program, I'd share tons of options. There's a You Need a Budget app. There's I think Mint is still around maybe. If you have a business, there's like endless different bookkeeping softwares. But I guess I just want to clarify, I'm talking about two different things here. One is like tracking what's here and what's coming, and one is tracking like what you spent. So this is bookkeeping. This is like planning and strategizing.
Oh, got it.
So some people do the budget thing, but I'm not using that word because it's limiting and it's like it's a restricting word. I use like spending plan. So how are you going to spend your money? You know, and it's also when you're going to get money.
Right. I like that. That's a better, I was going to say, how do you sort of, you know, balance this? how do you balance being mindful of money but not feed into a scarcity mentality? Like, how do you have an abundance mentality I used to joke with my friends when I would buy these big dollar items and say that I was manifesting making more money. But because I was going to act like I didn't care about money. But joking aside, I mean, how do you think about manifesting more money without focusing on what you have and what you need?
Yeah, two things come to mind. One is meeting yourself where you're at, honestly. So that really is getting clarity on how much money you have, how much money you bring in, how much money you need to spend, how much money you want to spend. And if you have something you want to spend money on that's bigger, you plan for it. Because otherwise you're in debt, and debt is not as abundance energy at all. And I know. So then, and it can even be debt, like overspending before you have enough money for expenses for the 2 months or whatever. It's like really giving yourself priority for your basic needs, and then like really prioritizing your value system with your money, and how you're spending it. And the other thing is a concept from a book called The Lotus and the Lily. I can't remember the author's name. I think her last name is O'Connor, maybe. But it's basically talking about different manifesting techniques that were taught by Buddha and Jesus. And it's really interesting because the main thing that she says that they said is that you create the circumstances to create what you want to create. So you can't, it's not going to just come to you out of the blue. So having it not being visible in a business is not going to get you clients. Like being visible, engaging with people and talking with people and learning sales and marketing and all these things can help you create the circumstances to allow the people to come in for your work,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I believe we have things, but we have to believe in things first, and we have to believe that it's going to happen, and then I think it makes it easier to work for it if you know that it's going to happen.
Yeah, there's a great quote by Brene Brown that says, so if somebody listening doesn't have the money habits that you want to have, there's a great question to ask. It's, what is the narrative getting in the way of the skill set? The Brene Brown quote. So it's like, if you have a skill set that you can do, like you can do math, or you can do creative, do some kind of spreadsheet or add on paper, or like whatever it is you want to do, but you're not doing it, there might be a narrative in your head. Like for me, it was like, I hate math. I'm not good at math. This isn't worth my time. It may be, why bother? It's hard to look at. It may be trauma from the past where you haven't had enough and you're just afraid to look at it. But this metaphor I'm about to share may help a lot. So
Okay.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, if you want to go somewhere in your life, so you want to go on a journey. So this is your vision you want to create for your life. And you are ready to go on this journey. You want to go somewhere new. Then you have to imagine having a boat that you're going to go on. A boat you're going to go on. So you basically have to look at the boat and make sure the boat is seaworthy, Like you can't just get in the boat and hope it works out. Like you have to actually go to the bottom of the boat, make sure there's no leaks, make sure that the compass works and the sail is strong and that all the ropes are strong. Like you have to assess where you are and then where you want to go and what you have available. How much gas do you have depending on the kind of boat it is? What's the weather going to be? And with our lives, without the equivalent of not doing that is like not looking at your money. If you face your money and you look at like how much you have, how much and you know where you want to go, you can figure out how far you can get based on where you are, and you can figure out what you need to get to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's a game changer, because like that kind of like clarity leads to freedom. Like that clarity leads to freedom, because like vagueness is just going to keep you in chaos, and I was the vagueness years ago.
Yeah, and people just don't want to think about what they're going to need.
No, But like, you can't get very far if you don't plan and strategize, right? I mean,
and so this is the kind of stuff you help people with.
yeah, I mean, mostly I'm focused on business, with clients, because they have a vision for a business, and they want to create it. And so I support them with the mindset and the tools and the practices to get there. And I think that for entrepreneurs, like, sometimes what's missing for them when they're not making progress the way they want to, it's because they don't have the money mindset that can allow them to receive more and create more. And I know that your most recent podcast talked a lot about self-care, and I'll talk about just briefly, like, one of the ways that seems counterintuitive to nurture prosperity mindset is self-care. It's giving yourself spaciousness. And, because like I remember one of the ways I lived in scarcity was time. Like, I'd be overly busy, and I'd be overly like taxed in all the ways, and I'd be running late all the time. So I was in scarcity all the time, and my body was like in that, And so prosperity is like giving your nervous system some
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
The nervous system is in two states, right? It's either in contraction or expansion. I know it's more complicated than that in a way, but that's kind of what we're dealing with here. So if you're in contraction, it's like really challenging to like expand and receive. But if you're in, and the crazy thing is that getting clear on where you're at can help you relax, even if you get scared, because you're gonna be more likely to like meet the challenges face on by being clear and knowing, like, in the storm what your boat has and what you need, as opposed to like just going for it, and hoping it works out, counterintuitive.
Right, and taking full responsibility for your money, and really, turning your willingness dial up to 11, willingness to look at your relationship with money, what you're doing, what your triggers are. We were talking a little bit before we started the podcast today, and I was saying that money is involved with some mental disorders, and one that comes to mind is hoarding, and people hoarding from this place that is really honestly driven from a place of scarcity. And what can happen when that goes unchecked is that you can end up getting into this place of like acquiring. And shopping is people just understanding what their relationship is like with shopping. I mean, like, if people could understand more about their relationship with shopping alone, like, people shop to numb out. There's a million ways to shop to numb out. Brene Brown talks about that too. She's brilliant. I love her.
Yeah.
Looking at people, like, understanding their relationship with shopping, and like being really impulsive, being reckless, and looking at that. And it's such an important thing to do. And you're absolutely right. The best self-care is planning and getting what you want. And who doesn't want that? But if you want to even hope to get what you want, you got to have a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And lack of planning is also a trauma thing.
Oh, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I just heard this recently that, because like if you were kind of like shuffled around as a kid, there was not planning and strategizing for your life. And so that's what you learned, was just like, chaos, So it takes like a mature perspective, and not being in like the kid version of ourselves, to be able to plan and strategize and even get support, to ask for help. Like, those are all really mature level of like, oh, okay. Like, and the thing about money stuff is that everybody thinks that everybody else knows, but nobody freaking knows how to deal with money until they actually learn the skill set and talk about things and everything, And I started this journey of learning in 2008. And before that, I never tracked anything. And now I've been tracking what I'm spending ahead of time since 2008, how many every years that is, Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And, and it's, I'm not perfect with bookkeeping though, like that. I still kind of like slack off a little while. I hate my software that I use. I get QuickBooks and I hate it. So I'm trying to like get a new system in place that I enjoy more. I'm looking at Wave, and there's one called XERO as well. So yeah, so it's a relationship. So it's dynamic, you know, it's not like you check it off the list and you're done. It's a relationship that's living. And so you get to constantly, you know, be in this dance and this dynamic with money to yeah, just learn more about it and learn about yourself along the journey, you know? Yeah.
That's wonderful. So in terms of the stress that money problems cause and having a scarcity mentality and stress, can you tell us a little bit more about that and sort of the challenges that you've seen?
Yeah. Mostly I'll talk about the ones I've experienced too, just because, I mean, for me, I have been in such scarcity for so long a period of time. It's impacted my health significantly.
Yes.
Impacted my relationship significantly. It's taken over my mental state, where I was just focused on like, how can I get, you know, whatever. And the challenging thing is that if you actually don't have your needs met, you have to figure out how to get them met. You have to get support, you know? So you can't bypass, you can't trump that voice that says there's not enough when there's actually not enough. And so for me, it's like, okay, if I start feeling that, and feeling that doesn't mean you don't have food, because that's our bottoms. You know, we've hit bottoms where haven't had enough food to actually have a nutritious meal. But it doesn't have to be that, because I know people whose bottom is, you know, thousands of dollars in the bank or just 3 months expenses. So it's all about perception. You know, I had this client many years ago who owned a huge business, and they were trying to decide between two huge investments that were like, you know, this huge trip, or like, I think it was a professional athletic team, buying a professional athletic team, or buying a jet. That was like the decision they were, you know, and I was like trying to figure out how to pay for tires at the time for my car. You know? And so I remember learning then from this client that, because he was wanting happiness and he had this vision, but he, you know, didn't know how to get there. And so, but like, I remember like, wow, it's not about the money at all. You know, it is about the money. Okay, that's not true. It is about the money until it's not. You know, it's about the money until you have your basic needs met. And then after that, certain places, and there's all this research about, you know, and this was years ago, so I'm sure the number has changed, but like after $70,000, people don't get happier with more money, really.
Right.
And I heard about a recent study, or not recent study, but a study I heard about last week from a colleague who, he heard this research study, and I don't have the stats on this, but this is a powerful story, where they interviewed people who had an average of $65 million net worth. And they asked them, how much more money would you need to feel secure, to feel safe? I think the word was safe. And they said 20 million. So this is what's amazing about mindset. Because like my coaching mentor, Martha Beck, says that you'll always have two voices. One says there's not enough, and one says you're in danger. And those voices are there to keep us safe, but our body doesn't know the difference between like a saber-toothed tiger and, you know, a check bouncing or a bill coming in, or, you know, something shifting with our money. And so part of us just panics. I remember like when I'd have creditors call me, or I'd get something in the mail about money stuff, I'd be like, oh, like I'd have that like whole, like, you know, like a fight or flight response, basically like a freeze, like almost. And it would be like, you know, my whole system would just freak out inside. And, you know, that has calmed down a lot, a whole lot. But I still have this little glimmer of it sometimes when I get something in the mail from the IRS, because I'm like, oh, when I'm being audited, you know, like there's just one little thing. And it's normal though. Some of that's normal, you know? And yeah. And so it's like, to be able to get support around this, whether it's a coach or a therapist, to talk about money, to really honor the relationship and to evolve our habits with money is massive. because it really is like this next level of maturity in ourselves and parenting ourselves. And it gives a container to create more in our lives and to have more autonomy and freedom.
Mm-hmm. So for the people that are out here that are really struggling financially, do you have a couple suggestions for them in terms of starting to develop a better relationship with money?
There are some free resources. I think most people here at local Asheville area listening maybe. So there's a place called On Track. There's 12-step programs for money, Debtors Anonymous, Under Earners Anonymous. So those are all free services. And you can, there's sometimes just credit counseling, that kind of stuff too. And then there's YouTube videos of basic stuff, like how to use Excel, basic stuff. On my website, JenAly coaching.com, there are links to my YouTube, or even my YouTube is just my name, JEN space ALY, and there's like a lot of resources there for money mindset and stuff like that are free. And on my website, I have some gifts. So if you go to jenalycoaching.com//gifts, GIFTS, there is a money makeover kit that's really great because it has a video workshop that also talks about the pandemic and how the pandemic has impacted our mindset around money. And then it gives a workshop on how to embrace the prosperity mindset piece and prosperity principles to embrace. And then there's also other parts of that kit that are helpful as well. So those are some things that are all free, that are great. And if somebody listening who has a business, who wants support, and who, there's all kinds of resources, I'm glad to be here. And they can reach out to me. And but if you're in survival mode, then that means like find free support and get into the habits, If you can pay for something, then that's a different level. So it depends on where you're at, really.
I would also say, before we wrap up, is that if any of our listeners are experiencing a lot of shame about their money, which that is something that I've really struggled with, and that's why like Brene Brown talks about, like, shame likes in hiding dark corners.
Yes.
It makes us not want to look at our spending. If we have shame about our spending, if we have shame about our debt, about our income, any of that, it's so important to share that with someone who has earned your trust.
Yes.
Share it. Because sharing the things that we have shame about is like holding it out in the light, and it just kind of evaporates. And ask for help, because this is stuff that we all struggle with at some point in our lives. And like I said, this has been like a lifelong journey with me. I actually was better at spending money when I was a kid. I used to save money, man. I would save money for some big items. My dad used to talk about that all the time. Like, I was a tenacious little kid when it came to saving money. But if you have shame about your money, there are people out here that can help you with it. Jen can help you. I can help you with that. But, sharing that with somebody that you trust to kind of work through that and help you find possible solutions, especially listeners that maybe have really gotten themselves into like a financial bind, and like they're making their minimum payment every month, and they've really gotten themselves into a bad situation, maybe by going out or just not being mindful about what you're spending. It's so easy to do that. And I just want people to know that no matter what their financial situation is, there's people out here, this is all they do, is specialize in financial assistance and helping people figure out what their budget is, how much they're spending. But there's lots of services that are available, like Jen said, and avoiding it is not going to make it any better. And you can end up in some really, really bad situations if you're not careful. So, the sooner the better. And, there's people out here like Jen that are out here that have that level of expertise and help you gain a better relationship with money, because this is a lifelong journey, really.
Absolutely.
Lifelong.
Any time or money you spend on your money relationship is investment in a long-term relationship, because it's not going to go away. Yeah.
No, you're right. You're right.
Form of currency in our world, for period. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And at the description of today's podcast, in the description for the YouTube, I'm gonna add your contact information. So if you want to get a hold of Jen, you can find that there. And I can say that just based on our conversation today, I'm feeling more motivated to tighten up my relationship with money again. And like I said at the beginning, I'm a work in progress, and I'm grateful for people like you in the world that can help people like me. Thank you so much. And if you have any other links or anything like that you would like to share, you can go ahead and email those to me, and I can include those in the description too. And I might very well talk to you about hiring you too, because that might be a good idea. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, have a wonderful evening.
You too.
I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.